Welcome, fans, to a special edition live on the Hannibal TV of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jack Kilby, Executive Vice President of Great North Wrestling. And tonight I'm pleased to have on a man who not only made his mark in the professional wrestling business, but also wartime combat. He has a really fascinating story and is an ECW original, which we love here on the Hannibal TV. Welcome to Chilly Willy to the Great North Wrestling Podcast, sir.
Yo, thank you. Thank you for having me on, brother. Thank you.
I think the fans would be interested to start off in knowing if you were a fan of the pro wrestling business growing up, and if so, did you have any particular companies or territories that you followed?
Growing up, well, I started really getting into wrestling back in go way back, 78, 79. I was about 9 years old, watching, WWF at the time, Bob Backlund, Jimmy Snuka, Lou Albano, and then when because I lived with my grandmother when I was a kid, and then my mom lived in North Carolina. So, periodically I would go down to North Carolina. And when I went to North Carolina, I would watch NWA, back then, Ricky Steamboat, Ronnie Piper, Ric Flair, those guys, Jimmy Valiant, who I'm still good friends with.
Mm-hmm.
So in that era, those, I like both. I really like both. Bob Backlund was a champion for a long time, and so was Ric Flair. Pedro Morales, Intercontinental Champion. You had a lot of wrestlers back then. I mean, big names, and that really sparked my interest in pro wrestling, for sure.
Did you have a specific moment or come to Jesus thing where you decided, you know what, I want to try, yeah, probably not the right word, but I want to make professional wrestling my career?
Yep. Actually, like I said, back when I was a little kid back then, because I used to get bullied a lot. But through my family, my cousins, and things like that, and I was always very skinny, and so for me watching that, they were like superheroes to me, and so my come to Jesus moment really was when I was in high school back in 85, 86, 87 in North Carolina. I really wanted to be wrestling. Back then we didn't have internet. We had the magazines, the wrestling magazines, that then they would advertise the schools, Killer Kowalski School or whatever inside the magazine. And so I was playing football and everything in high school. I was pretty good in football. I was pretty decent. I wasn't as good as my brothers were. I got two brothers that were really good, but my grades was sorry. I sucked. You know what I mean? So, but wrestling was just that thing I wanted to do. My coach asked me in my senior year. He said, "Hey, do you really want to go to school? I can get you to junior college. Get your grades up. You can play ball." I was like, "No, I really want to go to Charlotte and or somewhere, or go back up to go up to Boston, wherever the Killer Kowalski School was, and try to wrestle." So I sent out a letter and all that good stuff to them, and got a feedback, but I never did it. It didn't happen until I was 27. So back then I was 18, 17 years old, so almost 10 years it didn't happen, and but luckily it came around. Yeah.
I read online that you competed in Toughman competitions prior to getting into wrestling. How did you fall into that, and did that sort of pave your way into
Oh.
the business at all?
No, actually, I was actually already wrestling on the independent circuit, and just to make, I was working at a factory in Goldsboro, North Carolina. We were making car parts for Ford and Chevrolet and all that. And so, if I wasn't wrestling on a weekend, um, I would, and I saw a poster for Toughman, I would try it if it was close by. And so my first one, I tried it. It was in It was in Goldsboro, North Carolina. It was at a YMCA. I said, I'm just going to try it. I always liked boxing too. Growing up in the 70s, we would go to the YMCA and it was boxing. Especially in the city, it was boxing. And so, but I never had any form of training in boxing. I just watched television and things like that. So I said, I try it, man. I went in there and I won, my first one. And I was like, wow. And then I got $500. I was like, yo, this paid more than wrestling. Wrestling, I was getting $25. $25 for wrestling, versus $500. I was like, yo, And so every time it would come around, I would try it. And for about 3 or 4 times that they came around close to my area, I tried it in North Carolina. And I won all of them. So, luckily. But now, here's the thing, I'll be 54 next week. And so the thing is, I go to the gym here in the Philippines and do a little boxing, or try to do a little boxing. And let me tell you, if that isn't some of the hardest, workouts, I really think it's harder than wrestling, other than taking the bumps or whatever. But man, the footwork, the jab, the move and the slip, it ain't no joke. So when I'm, here I'm gonna, for those who listening, if you are sitting home and you're watching UFC, pro boxing, even wrestling, but those two specifically, and you're sitting on the couch thinking you could do that, yo. I'm telling you, it is something. It's something to try, brother. I'm telling you, it's no joke. It is no joke. Yeah.
Absolutely. Can you talk about your particular process in terms of training for pro wrestling? I read that you were a student of Larry Sharp, and CW Anderson had a hand in it as well.
Well, what happened was in 1989. 1888, 89. I got married. I was young, right out of high school. Moved up to Rochester, New York. And so at that time, I kind of scouted out, saw that Larry Sharp had a school called the Monster Factory, legendary. Told my wife, I said, I'm going to take 2 days off from work. I drove down from Rochester down to New Jersey. And I tried out. I tried out that one time back in 90, 91, I think it was 90. And so didn't have the money for it. Didn't have the money to go to school full time because that was, that's so far. And then I had a, wife. So went back to Rochester. I never forgot about wrestling. I just put it on back burner because, my priorities was my family first. No kids, but just my wife and myself and bills and all that stuff. So it wasn't until 96 that I had also, I was working for Foot Locker, assistant manager, got transferred out from North Carolina to South Carolina in Myrtle Beach. And so that's when the power plant, WCW power plant was, around opening and stuff like that. And they were like, kind of auditioning, asking people to come out, whatever, tryouts. So I took another couple of days off, went down, drove down to Atlanta, and for like 3 or 4 days I tried out for the WCW power plant. And let me tell you, that was hard. That was Sarge, but that brother, man, we had about 30, 35 guys come in, some former college football players, some other, indie wrestlers or whatever. And for 3 days, they grilled you. I mean, he squat. What he would do is get a bucket. He had buckets lined up, like paint buckets, 5-gallon paint buckets. And you go grab your bucket. And I'm thinking, what are we gonna do with a bucket? And you're gonna sit there and do squats. And he started. If you could do 25 straight, we'll move on to push-ups and sit-ups. Well, we never got to 25. You always got to like 15 or 16. Start all over. You cockroach, and the people were just falling out. And luckily, I made it. And I have a picture on my Facebook page where I have a picture with Chris Benoit, and Steven Regal. That was the last day that I had made it through. It was on a Friday because those guys would come in and get their checks. So, I remember Adam Bomb, guys like that. The tag team power. I forgot the name. Anyway, but there was a lot of all those guys would come in and they would get their paychecks. And so I marked out, man. I was like, yo, I want Chris Benoit, I want Steven Regal, and they took a picture with me. So if you see that picture on my Facebook page, that's where that's from. That's 1996. Well, I did have I passed it, but I didn't have the money to go to school. It was like $3,000, $4,000 to go to school. So I talked to Mr. Jody Hamilton, and I told him, I said, I don't have the money. So I went back home to North Carolina, lived with my mom and dad, and they had a wrestling match at my old high school. The same day they had my 1987 high school reunion. I didn't go. I went to the wrestling match because my dad was the custodian worker, so I got in free. I snuck in the back door. So I snuck in the back door, and Steve Carino, it was Steve Carino, Joey Matthews, Christine York, C.W. Anderson, Lodi, the Hardy Boys, but that's before they were all big. They were all doing a show there. And so I went over to the sound system guy and said, lo and behold, that was C.W. Anderson's cousin. His name was Dan Wright. He still runs a school in Selma, North Carolina. And so it's called Factory. So anyway, I talked to him. I said, how can I get involved in this, wrestling thing? And he gave me a number and went out maybe a week later on a Tuesday night in Kinley, North Carolina, and started training me and two other guys. A guy named Laz, he did some work in TNA, and then there's another guy, Stacy. So CW was the trainer then. And so CW was my trainer for maybe a couple of months, and then he got snagged to ECW. And there's another guy that came in. His name was Gary Simone out of Mount Airy, North Carolina. He finished up the training, and then we never really finished up, but he was just training, then started doing shows, and then that's how that started. And then one night we had a indie show in Durham, North Carolina. Steve Carino and C.W. Anderson came out. They checked it out, and everything. And because on that circuit, I have to go back a little bit. On that circuit in North Carolina, in Eastern North Carolina, there's a promotion called Gouge Wrestling, but it was called SCW back then. There's a guy named Greg Grog. He still do some shows a little bit or whatever. But back then we had Shane Helms, we had the Dupps, we had the Hardy Boys, we had Dak Hardwood, which is back then he was Casey the Knight. Caprice, he would come through, I think. And so a lot of those guys we were wrestling doing, at a bar and things like that. And so one evening, Steve Carino and CW came and they said, yo, you need to come with us after I did a match. Come with me up towards Philly area. I think it was Washington, D.C. Check out ECW because I had no clue what ECW was. Never watched it. And did a tryout there, and that's how I got in. If it wasn't for CW and Steve Carino, I probably would have never got into ECW. So I got to always give my praise and thanks to those two guys.
Did the everybody's homeboy babyface moniker come about? How did that come about? Because a lot of fans still look back on that fondly.
Oh man, let me see. When I was on the ring crew, that's how I got on. I got on in ECW when I started wrestling, and I got on the ring crew. The Baldies, they got off the ring crew, and so Tommy Dreamer said, "Hey, can't pay you much. I'll pay you for wrestling, and I'll pay you for doing the ring." So I would drive from North Carolina to Philadelphia, pick up Mike Keener, the referee, and then we'd go to Long Island, pick up the ECW ring truck. And then we go wherever ECW was. We set up the ring. I come back, drop him off in Philadelphia, and I go back to North Carolina and spend the rest of my week. Anyway, so that's how I got in and started wrestling with ECW. And I was like the curtain jerker, always coming out first, whatever. And let me tell you something straight out. I sucked as a wrestler. I know I sucked. If it wasn't for my physique, I think, I was pretty decent, as far as body wise, 250 I was carrying, I looked pretty decent, but man, was I green as green could be. I think everybody that I wrestled would carry me every single match. And so I started, I think my first match was with Guido. And it was I want to say, no, it was Julio in Virginia. And then after that, I started, wrestling with Guido and things like that. Man, he would carry me, man. I would just be like a deer, looking to the headlights of a car when it comes to spots. I'm like, huh? And so I didn't really have a gimmick. It was just, Chilly Willy. And they would say, where you hail from? And I remember one day I said, well, I didn't want to say I'm from North Carolina, Fremont, North Carolina. That's my little small town, hometown. So wherever I was at, I said, I'm from Virginia, Richmond, Virginia. Or I said, I'm from Wichita, Kansas, or, and things like that. So it caught on. I don't know who exactly said that I was everybody's favorite homeboy. I don't know. I didn't say it. It was someone else that said it first. So I think that's how that came out. So it just stuck, and I was like, all right, let's go with it.
Yeah. The best things happen in wrestling organically. Phil wants to know, what were your favorite ECW towns, and do you have any memories of the New England area?
New England, no. Not really. I think my really first memorable was Danbury, Connecticut. That was one. The crowd was like hostile, you know what I mean? And I wasn't a face yet. I just came out. They were chanting, "Who the F are you? Who the F are you?" And I was like, what is this? Because like I said, I didn't know anything about ECW. I just thought it was just a regular, indie promotion. But Danbury stands out. I want to say New York City, of course, the Hammerstein, that stands out. Chicago, that stood out, things like that. So, yeah.
Wanted to ask you about your two-part question. Your first time meeting Paul Heyman, what your impressions were of the man, and any notable interactions thereafter that the fans would be interested in.
Oh man, the first time I met Paul Heyman, I had seen him, like on WCW a little bit. It's like, wow, I was kind of like, marking out when I first saw him, coming to the arena. It was the first time I went to ECW and I did a workout. And I forgot the guy who I worked out with. But anyway, that guy was supposed to be on the show. And so we were in the ring and we were working out, because you get to work out once the ring gets put up, you just get in and work out. And so we worked out, and the guy did something wrong, and I yelled. I was like, what the hell are you doing? Or whatever. And I remember Paul Heyman was sitting over there talking to Tommy Dreamer. And I had no idea who Tommy Dreamer was, other than that I knew that he was the one that, paid you or whatever. And so after that, they saw that Tommy came up there and asked me, said, hey, would you gonna wrestle? We're gonna wrestle that night or whatever. And he kind of introduced me to Paul at that time. And that's how I met Paul, and Paul was cool. He was, hey guy, whatever, you look good, whatever. He didn't have a lot of things to say to me because he hadn't seen me really wrestle. But then that night when I wrestled, and it was pretty good. It was okay. It was, like I said, my wrestling sucked. It was okay. It was my charisma that got me over. And then Tommy, offered me the job. That's when I started seeing Paul more, and then of course, he was with the big guys, the Rob Van Dam's, and because the ECW we were together. We had a locker room that was like family, but we also had our own separate groups in there. You know, you had your the top guys, your mid guys, and then there was us, the ring crew guys. You know what I mean? So, and I loved it, and that's how you interact with Paul. You would just go in before the show, and everyone is around the ring. Everyone's practicing their moves and what they're gonna do for that show that night. And Paul will come in, he'll talk to certain ones, and then for those of us he didn't talk to, you just sit on the sidelines and look at him. You know what I mean? And that's how Paul ran his thing until he knew who you are and kind of took an interest in you. You didn't really interact with him that much. You know what I mean? But he was nice enough. He was a nice enough guy that he would, he would talk to you a little bit. But if he wasn't interested in you, you were just there collecting a paycheck or whatever. You were still kind of part of the family, but just like a redheaded stepchild type thing.
Having had the pleasure of seeing a couple of shows back in the day at the ECW Arena in Philly on Swanson and Rittner, I like to ask the originals such as yourself what your experience was like working in there and the legendary, well now legendary, almost mythological atmosphere of the place. What was that like specifically for you?
Like I said, I didn't know anything about ECW. I didn't know the history. I really didn't even know that the arena was iconic. It was just, for me, it was coming from North Carolina, putting up the ring, wrestling, and taking my black ass back home. And so, because I didn't know anything, I didn't know, it wasn't like the Dorton Arena where I grew up watching. Now had it been me wrestling in Dorton Arena in North Carolina, Raleigh, where I grew up watching the NWA, I would have been marking like crazy. But for me, because I didn't know anything about ECW, because we didn't get it in North Carolina, I had no clue what it was all about. All I knew was when I went in there and the show started, it was like one of the loudest places I ever heard. I was like, yo, what is going down here? The ECW. And, our fan base was what, 99.9% all male, from the ages of 17, 18 to 34, 35. And it was just like, it was like a cult, and so the thing was, when I did wrestle there, I don't even think I had a solid match there. I think I went out and did something, but I was terrified. I was like, whoa, because they would really shit on you, or they would praise you depending on how good you were. And that's what made ECW. The fans really made ECW, made them accountable, made us accountable for the things that we did, and even now you watch wrestling, it's kind of hard for any promotion that you see that does that, because now in this era, everyone's for themselves or whatever. And it's like, it's good that you do your thing and you do your spot monkey and everything. That's all good. But the ECW crowd it seemed to me, the ECW crowd made you not forget your psychology and where things supposed to be. It was sort of like they dictated what you were supposed to do, because if you messed up, you hit one wrong move, they will let you have it. You didn't even have to think about you messed up. They will let you know. And you knew the next show, I better not mess up, because I'm gonna get eaten alive, and then that's if you start messing up like that, I think that's when people like Tommy Dreamer and Paul Heyman will take notice. If Paul Heyman didn't notice you, then back before, he would notice you if you started messing up. You didn't want the ECW chant. You wanted a good ECW chant. So, working at the arena was like, it was just, I was like, whoa. I think at one time I did something, and I got on the ropes, the top, I put my foot on the bottom rope or the middle rope, and I did something, and I fell over. I fell over, but luckily, you got to put your head down, and I landed on my feet, and they was like, "You effed up, you effed up." I was like, "Ugh." but because whoever I think Nova or somebody else was in the ring, the storyline went there. I got a small chant of "you effed up," but then because of the storyline or what was going on in the ring, they took the attention back on them, and I kind of got out of that. But I messed up big time because you get on the ropes like Matt Hardy does this thing like that. I got on the ropes like that, and I went over, and I said, "Oh man," they like, "You effed up, you effed up." So yeah, when you go to the arena, man, you want to make sure that your stuff is on point. You definitely want to make sure that your wrestling was on point for sure.
Yeah, very, very unforgiving fans, to say the least.
I'm telling you.
When you debuted with the company, can you talk about ECW was at that stage where the TV deal was coming together with TNN, and that they had to either get bigger, or the fortunes would sink because they were too big to be an indie.
Right.
What are your recollections of that time in terms of the locker room atmosphere and the positivity around the TV deal? Because I know around then the video game came out, the merch,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. Was it a positive time, or was there skepticism?
For me, because I was so low on the totem pole, um, like I said, being a ring crew guy, getting $75 for the putting up the ring and $75 $5 to wrestle, that was my budget. I mean, that was it. I wasn't under contract or anything like that. Like I said, I was a green gobbler, man. I was just green. I I don't know if the company would have stayed around, I probably would have gotten on contract. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe, But at that point, I was satisfied with just that. And so, when The Rock says, stay in your lane, know your role.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much what we did as far as the ring crew guys. We would hear bits and pieces, but because we were not main top guys or even mid card guys, we didn't know what was going on. I didn't know anything about the what do you call the game, the video game that came out. I just heard things about it. I think CW was on it, other guys like that. But guys who were not on it, only thing we were concerned with was putting up the ring, wrestling, taking down the ring, going home. When the pay structure thing started, with the TV deal, we kind of heard bits and pieces about that. Um, but it wasn't really that big of a deal to us, especially not to me. It was just okay because I wasn't on a contract. I just knew my salary, and so. But the only thing that did started unraveling was when we weren't getting paid. Well, they weren't getting paid. I was still getting paid, because my salary was so low. And we did know about times when Tommy would take money from the merchandise and that he would pay the boys or whatever. The morale was kind of low then, but like I said, being a young Green Goblin, I was just there, Even though I was older than a lot of those guys, I was just there, watching everything unfold. Guys getting mad, Fonzie getting mad, New Jack mad, guys, everybody was mad. Everybody was just hot, I mean, it was like, at that time, Paul was kind of like had jumped ship to WWE and things like that, or so for me, it was just like I said, I was just standing by. I'm like one of those people that was in a room that's like standing on a wall where things go out. While things around me was just unfolding. So, yeah, that was it for me. You know.
You mentioned the anger of New Jack at the time. I know you tagged with him. What are your and RIP Jerome Young, but what stands out most from your interactions with him, either in the ring or backstage?
Yo, rest in peace, New Jack, Jerome, Balls Mahoney. You know, those two guys, man. I mean, I could not for the life of me tell you why Paul put me with them. I was honored to be with them. I would get in the ring and just watch them, you know, because I was so glad, especially with New Jack. I was so glad that I was not on the receiving end of any stabbings or, you know, ice picks in the forehead. I would just sit there and look at him when he did the baldies like that, you know. I didn't really tag with him or anything. It was just, I think I would start off doing a wrestling match and he would come in and save me, kind of build up to that storyline. Balls I tagged with. New Jack was more like, you know, he would just come in. But New Jack was New Jack. That was, you know, to me, very nice guy, you know. But I remember the very, very, very first time meeting him when I was, like I said, when CW and Steve Carino invited me somewhere out in Asheville. I think it was Asheville, North Carolina. They had a show. Well, they were signing autographs. This was my first time in it. And I was just standing by the autograph table. And I didn't know who New Jack was, didn't know none of those guys. I didn't know none of them. And a little kid came up and said, "Can I get your autograph?" And New Jack didn't know me from day one. He's just like, "Yo, he ain't with us." You know, he's talking about me. He's like, "He ain't with us." I was like, "Who this mother?" I was like, "Who this dude?" You know, as a street person, I'm not a street person, but I was like, "Who this dude, man?" I don't take too much, you know, stuff from people, but you know, it was his show and everything. And then afterwards, he came up to me. He's like, "Yo," he's like, "You know, this is our show. If you're not with us, then you know you need to like kind of step off to the side a little." And I respected that. You know, he didn't come at me crazy and anything like that. But after that, then once I got into ECW, it was like, Chilly, brother. You know, it was like, you know, he would get. I don't want to put him under the. He would do some things outside of wrestling, you know, and he couldn't function well. So I would have to drive him around and things like that. I remember driving from Philadelphia all the way up to, you know, Ohio, you know, and he was just jacked up, you know what I mean? So just things like that, you know. And if he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't like you, he let you know he didn't like you. You know, that was just how he was. So. But we had a pretty decent relationship, man. He was always cool with me. Same was Balls, you know. Balls same way. Balls was much nicer in a sense with everyone outside the ring, you know. And he was more like a kid, a big kid. That's how Balls was, you know. And you know, both of those guys were great, man. They were some great guys. I learned some things from them, you know. And you know, even wrestling, you know. New Jack, you know, he would tell me, "You got to be confident in yourself, and you need to do this, you need to do that," you know. And so, those are some of the things that I learned, I picked up on, and but at the time, like I said, man, I was like a kid in the candy store, like, what's going on, you know, in wrestling, you know, and it's like, you know, and so when I see those guys come out, the crowd pop. Even with Sandman, I tagged I think once or twice, and you know, those Sandman, New Jack, Balls Mahoney, man, probably would have some of the biggest pops, you know, in ECW. You know, the music hit, and it was like a cult. You know, New Jack, of course, with the hip hop, and you know, and Sandman with balls, and then I mean. Balls Mahoney, and then Sandman would come out, man, and the crowd would just go crazy. And I just sit there and look at it like, you know, I'd be in the ring like, yo. And here I am, you know, and they got their t-shirts on, they got their jeans on, and their pants. I mean, in regular tights. And, you know, luckily I had a decent body then. I was like, yo. But I was lucky, and I'm glad that it happened the way it happened. And I don't have no complaints about it. You know what I mean? I know I suck, but I had no complaints.
I was actually going to ask you how you got put together with the Sandman a couple of times, actually more than a couple of times as a team.
Man, to this day, I couldn't even tell you. But all I knew is I think I don't even remember the first time I got put with balls or even Sandman. I don't even know. It was just like, I think one night, I know at the Hammer sign, one night Paul just said, Chilly, you're doing a tag tournament. And he was like, you're gonna tag with the Sandman. I said, what? To myself. And I didn't, as a wrestler, you're supposed to go over and ask, hey, what are we gonna do? Whatever. And I was like, how do I talk to this dude? It's like, how do I talk to Hack? But Hack, he was cool. He was like, all right, kid, here's what you're gonna do. You ain't gonna do nothing. You're just gonna sit there wait for my music pop. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna pop with the king, and you're gonna roll out the ring and da 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 da. I was like, okay, all right. And then that's it. He didn't say nothing else, and he would go do his thing, and then when it was time for us to come out and his music hit, everybody forget about me, and they would just look at Hack, oh snap. And then Balls, same thing, Balls would come out and he would just say, Chilly, you gonna do this, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. And that's it, you just let them take the lead, and you sit back and you wonder, how did you get tagged with these guys? You know what I mean? These are pretty much top level guys, you know what I mean? In ECW, how did you get to tag with them? I remember one night, Raven was there, and I didn't tag with him, but he came out and he tagged. I guess we tagged, but it wasn't like no tag. It was just he came in and did a run-in for me or whatever. I don't know who I was wrestling. I forgot who I was wrestling. I just know that he came in and did a run-in with me and for me and everything. And I was like, yo, that's Raven. And I was like, and so, Paul would do things like that. He was just, and for me, like I said, I was so green. I was so giddy. It was like, it may not look like it, but for me, inside, I was like, yo, once I knew who these characters were and everything, I was marking out, you know what I mean? And so, but that's what made ECW in the locker room so great, because they could do a run-in for you or be with you on a tag session, and it's like, yo, you one of us. They'd tell you, they would critique you right then and there after the match, hey, you did this wrong, or you did this right, or whatever. And that's how we build. And it was like every weekend when we saw each other, same thing, hey, you need to do it this way, Chilly. You need to do it that way. This looks good, Chilly. You know what I mean? Or this didn't look good, And so that's how we learn. That's how we learn on the fly, ECW. Or that's how I learned.
Yeah, I also just recently saw a match that you had on TV against Rhino for the television championship.
Yes.
Can you talk about that? And you must have figured, holy, I'm figured in at this point, correct?
I think that was in Minnesota or somewhere like that. I can never forget that. And when they told me that, I was like, even though you knew the outcome, but just to be wrestling the television champion, I was like, yo, what? Me, Rinku guy? I was doing the curtain jerk thing for a long time, and wrestling guys like Red Dog, and, Mike Bell, rest in peace, guys like that, Tony Mama Luke, and then they put me in there with Rhino for a television. I was like, yo, what's going on? And so, we were in there, and Rhino was another guy. He was really good. Rhino's like a very quiet dude. Like, he's nothing like the character. I mean, outside, once wrestling is done, he's just like the most nicest guy, man. You might want to ever, be around. Like Balls and New Jack, Sandman. Those guys are loud. They can be kind of loud. They're nice guys too, but they're like loud. But Rhino, man, he's like a puppy, man. After wrestling, you don't hear nothing from him. And so, but when he's in the ring, his presence is like, yo, that spear is like, what off, And so, when Paul put me up against him a couple of times, and I was like, what is they doing, And I didn't know what they're doing, And so I was just glad to be around it. And like I said, that was I knew I wasn't going to win the belt, but just to be in that in that match, was like, yo, I wrestled for the television championship, so yeah, it was a cool thing, very cool.
I want to shout out a man that you wrestled several times, a friend of mine who's recuperating, hopefully recovered from surgery as we speak. That would be the Kingpin, Angel Medina of the Baldies.
Yes.
Yeah, he wanted to say hello, and also the fact that you worked against the Baldies and Angel numerous times. Do you have any highlights of that
oh man,
out in your mind?
Yeah, the one that really stuck out. Well, we did it in St. Paul, Minnesota, but the one pay-per-view that we did was in Chicago, the Flaming Tables match. And like I said, I never watched ECW, so I wasn't familiar with that. With the Dudleys and stuff, I didn't know anything about a Flaming Table match. Only thing I knew that they said the table's going to be on fire, Angel's going through it. And so, because I thought because I was the Green Goblin that I was going to go through it. Well, we call it a match in the back, and I noticed everyone had T-shirts on except for me. I don't have no T-shirt on, but I still thought I was going through the table with the fire, and I was like, "Yo, how am I gonna do this?" And I got this oil on me and shit, this Pam or whatever. So I'm gonna probably burn up. And I remember Angel said, "No, jackass, you're not going through the table. Look at it, Chilly." He was like, "Yo, look at it, Chilly. You don't have no T-shirt on, do you? You're not going to the table. What the F, Chilly?" Yo, so I thought about it after he said that. I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not." But yeah, we would do a match. He would say, "Just I got you. Just stick." DeVito and Balls would go at it. And me and Angel would stick with me. He would, take me around the building and just beat the crap out of me. I beat the crap out of him, and we just, that was the thing with me and Angel. Angel, great guy too, man. He was the first one. He was the first. He kind of got me on ECW also because he wanted to get off the ring crew. He went to Paul. He was like, "Yo, if this guy want to get on, man, he could do." And there's an opening on the ring crew. I ain't gonna never forget. He said that, "Yo, there's an opening on the ring crew, Poppy." That's because he's Puerto Rican. So I was like, "What? What is he talking about, ring crew?" And so I think that's how I got on. Also, he got off. They got off the ring crew. I got on, but he would when it comes to when we did a match, he would always kind of like stick with me and grab me and pull me out and beat the crap out of me or whatever. And so I had good times with Angel. Him and Sal, they ribbed me a lot though, man. Him and Big Sal, that's another one. He's another nice guy, but he's big. He was at the time he was huge, but they would do some ribbing, man. They, they would definitely rib you.
Yeah, Angel's certainly a jokester, and now I know he always talks about the ring crew with him and DeVito as a running joke on our podcast, Shooting from the Hip, that airs here on the Hannibal TV. But now I know. I just wanted to get your thoughts, being towards the end of your tenure and the uncertainty in the company with respect to its future. Were you aware that Mr. Heyman was supposedly seeking a new TV deal because of the hatred of TNN? And were you surprised when the last show happened and then he debuted on Raw, that being Mr. Heyman?
No, I didn't know that he was shopping for another deal. We thought that we was, I thought that he was still going to stay at TNN, and but when he started missing, when he were missing at the shows and people weren't getting paid, and then there were grumblings about him going to WWE, we kind of saw the writing on the wall, and I didn't attend the last ECW match. I don't know where my last match was when I was at ECW. I can't remember, but I knew. Okay, I did know that. I think it was in Arkansas or something like that, or somewhere like that. But I didn't go because at that time I was being flown to the shows. But I remember Tommy Dreamer said, you don't have to worry about going to the show here. or the last show, could be possibly our last show. And so when he told me that, because I got off Ring Crew, they got me off of Ring Crew after we had that big fight with XPW. You know, that's when I got off the Ring Crew, because up until then, we drove from Long Island all the way out to California, did the XPW. I mean, we did the show in California. The XPW fight broke out, and then we drove back. And then after that, that's when I got off the Ring Crew. Well, anyway, I was being flown to shows, and then that last one, Tommy said, "Nope, you don't have to go." And so that's when I knew that ECW was kind of folding. And I said, "Oh, snap, I better get a job." And it wasn't luckily that 9/11 happened. It was just unfortunate that 9/11 happened. And I always wanted to be in the military in some aspect, or be, you know. And so I said, well, wrestling is not, I didn't want to pursue, it was kind of hard trying to pursue WWE and WCW at the time. I was like, I didn't have time. I had to make a decision to go into the military or go back to work in the factory. So I said, I'm tired of working in the factory. So I tried my hand at the military. And that's what happened. That's when I signed up for the military, you know. And like I said, I never did the last show. And that was like my last time I had ever, you know, talked to those guys or seen those guys after that. You know, then after that, I went to the military, and that was it. You know, I didn't even get a goodbye. You know, I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to no one, you know, because I thought we were going to do some more shows. But when Tommy said, no, that you don't have to come to that show, and then after that, I think that's when I heard, you know, ECW was closing. And I was like, oh, snap, you
know. I did have on here to ask you about that XPW situation and your involvement in that. I'd love to hear your recollection of that. That
oh,
deal.
wow. Yeah, we did the show. I did dark match. I think with Bill Wiles. I think that was. I don't know who it was. Dark match with. Did a dark match there in California, and then we knew the XPW guys they were out there sitting in the front row or second, third row, and anyway got to the main event. I think it was, and they did something. They took their shirts off, turned it inside out or something. And I don't think I can remember. We were all sitting in the back because they were kind of watching. And Paul was like, you know, everybody was kind of like on a short leash. And then when they did that, I think something happened with Francine or something. They did that. They turned their shirts inside out or something. Paul flipped out in that bag. He's, God damn it, XPW. And that's when everyone who was there, we were like, what? And then Paul ran out, and then Atlas Security came. He wanted them removed. Well, when Paul ran out, we just ran with him, and we just ran out there with them. You know, we didn't care about the show and nothing. We were just going to back him up because, you know, contrary to belief is, you know, even though Paul Heyman was Paul Heyman, you know, he could sell you his own dirty underwear. We would take up for him, you know what I mean? And so, like I said, he was like the dad, and we were like the kids, and we were like ready to go. So they got him out of there. Well, they went out somewhere on a side door, and then we came out in the back where all the production was. We came out in the back. We ran around, and it was like me, Balls, Cash, I think, Red Dog, I think Angel. I'm not sure if Angel was there. A bunch of us, a couple, you know. And so they came out a side door, and by the time we got around, someone said that's the XPW guys. We caught them, and man, when we caught them, it was like, I don't know, maybe I can't remember how many it was for them, but we were going at it. We were just breaking them off. Boom, boom. I don't know who was in the XPW. To this day, I can't even tell you anyone from XPW. I don't know. I barely knew what was going on in ECW. So I didn't know no guys from XPW. I didn't know the history or nothing what was going on. All I knew was that we were brothers, and if I didn't recognize you as a ECW wrestler, I'm punching you. So we was just punching guys, pow, 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 beating the crap out of them. And the only thing I do remember seeing a limousine that was parked on the other side of it. And then Paul Heyman came out that same door that they came out of. And when Paul Heyman came out, it was like some people surrounded Paul, but I didn't know who he was, or we didn't know who they were. We didn't know if they were fans or whatever. Someone were fans, I think. Well, I ran over there and I just started pushing people. Get the F back. Get Paul, go inside, push, and Paul saw that, me, I think some other ones, Paul saw that I was instrumental in that. And then there was a cop that came, and I was cursing at the cop. You need to arrest them. Blah, blah, blah. I was really agitated. So at the end of the show, that was the last match. At the end of the show, we were taking down the ring. Paul came to Tommy. They were talking. Paul said, "You know what? Like I said, Paul he can sell you his dirty underwear, bro, and you will buy it. That's how good of a salesman he was." He was like, "You're a bad mother," whatever. And I was like, "You what tough motherfucker," And I was like, "Yo, I was just, hey, Paul, we just do what we had to do." And after that, right after that, Tommy Dreamer came to me, pulled me to the side. He said, "You know what? Paul likes your attitude. He liked what you did. The next show, you're going to be flying." And that was the last time I was on the ring crew. And boy, did the guys on the ring crew have a fit. They were like, "Why you getting off the ring crew? How you get off the ring crew? What the F, man? We've been here longer than you." And so, that's what happened with XPW. And me and Mike Keenan, we flew back, I think somewhere, Texas or Florida, where we picked up the ring crew truck and drove it from Florida to back to Long Island. Well, I fell asleep at the wheel and crashed the ring crew truck.
Oh, no.
Luckily, thank God we didn't get hurt. And
that's a long ass drive.
Yeah, and we that was the last time I was on the ring crew, and I messed up the ECW truck. But yeah, that was the fight that happened. Yeah, that was the fight that happened in XPW. And then I think maybe a couple of months later we got. I think they tried to subpoena us to go to court for something, but nothing never came about it. So, yeah.
So you left wrestling, you enlisted, and thank you for your service, by the way. Saw combat in Iraq. You were decorated. Very difficult theater at the time. Still is, I would imagine. And then you returned to about 2004, if I have that accurate. You returned and you got a developmental deal with OVW.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Well, when I got hurt in Iraq, it went out on the internet and everything, and so a lot of guys were, sending me love and everything. A lot of, especially from the wrestling community, Rob Van Dam, all those guys, and Paul Heyman. Paul was already in WWE, of course, and so Paul just said, "Hey," he sent me an email. He said, "When you get out, you contact me. I got something for you." And I was like, "Oh snap!" And I was, injuring. I was nursing my injuries in Iraq, and so I couldn't even get out fast enough. The military, and they were already, sending me a contract, like not a contract, but they were kind of like fishing me in, TNA and WWE, and of course I didn't, because I was in Iraq. I didn't know what TNA was. We didn't know Total Nonstop Action, what that was, because we had TV for a whole year and a half almost. And so I didn't know that Scott Diamore, he was also involved. He was like vice president, but I think he's president now or something like that. And I remember wrestling him up in Toledo, Ohio. He did the job for me, thank God. But so they were contacting me, and we were already in Iraq. Well, when we got back stateside, there was a message. There was two messages for me, TNA, WWE. So I called them, and I spoke to Paul. And then, of course, I'm going to take the WWE, not the TNA, because So I took the WWE way, and they flew me out while I was still in the military. They flew me out to Cleveland and I think Chicago. I want to say Chicago. I'm not sure. And I, just watched the match, and they wanted me actually to do something like a GI Bro gimmick, like the Booker T thing, where they wanted something military with me. They were going to put me. They had Sergeant Slaughter. I remember that when I flew out, I met Sergeant Slaughter for the first time. Talked to him. They had me do a promo and everything, and then I was still in the military. They flew me back to my base in Watertown, New York, Fort Drum, and so there I received a contract from Pritchard, and I signed the contract, and I was on contract, and then maybe I still had 2 months or 3 months left in my contract with the U.S. military, but because of that WWE, contract, they let me out early. The military let me go 2 months early, and I went straight to OVW down in Louisville, and and that's what happened. And I think Paul was telling me something. I don't know if it was gonna happen or if it ever, he was doing like a Muhammad Hassan gimmick. I can't think of the guy's name, but I know Jimmy Snooker's son was involved. Him and Davardi, and Mark. I think the other guy's name Mark something. Anyway, and so I just remember Paul was saying, if you get right, get developed and everything, we're gonna try to incorporate something because they were doing that gimmick and they wanted American hero type stuff, and they was trying to prep me to get ready for that, but I just couldn't get myself together. I just got out of the military. The military was so fresh in my brain, man. I was like, when I went into the military, I was green. When I came back, I was like gangrene. I was that bad, because I really wanted to fight. I was still in fight mode. So I was down in OVW, guys like Ken Anderson, the Boogeyman, Beth Phoenix, guys like that. And so Bobby Lashley, and man, I think I want to. Lance Storm he was a trainer. Hugh Morris, he was a trainer, but he got let go after right when I got there, and then Tommy Dreamer started training people down there. But I remember we were doing a tag match, and Beast, the brother who passed away, Chad. What's Chad's last name? Man, Chad Gaspar.
Chad. Yeah.
Yeah. Me and him, we were tagging one time against someone, and I remember Tommy Dreamer was he was refereeing the match, and he told me to do something, and I totally flipped and did something totally different. And he's like, "Chili, what's wrong with you, man?" He's like, I didn't call that, because in WWE, of course, sometimes the referee may call a spot or something like that. So he called it, and I messed up, and he was like, "What's wrong?" He said, "Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm okay." He said, "No." He said, "No, man." He said, "I don't know what they did to you over there, but they messed your head up. Because you're not the same Chilly Willy that you were before you left." He said, "You're totally different, brother." And so from then on, I was on the bubble. I was on the bubble from then on, man, and I just couldn't get it right. I wasn't performing right. And then one day, John Laurinaitis came down. No, before that, Stephanie, Paul Heyman, John Laurinaitis, they came in to OVW and they interviewed all of us. Undertaker, he would come in sometimes, see the Dudley Boys or whatever, they come in. But this time, Stephanie came in, Paul Heyman. And so after all of us did a match, they would interview us. Well, we did a match. I did a match with someone, and Stephanie, right there in front of everyone, in front of all the talent, you know, she asked me, she said, what happened to you in Iraq? And she grilled me. She grilled me about what happened to me, and I just went back mode. I was like, what? She said, how did you, you know, get hurt or whatever? And so I started telling a story, and then I told the story about one of my colleagues getting killed, and I broke down, started crying. Well, that was real. It was just as real as because it was just too much. I broke down in front of everybody, and I just left. I walked out, and he pulled me to the side, talked to me. Stephanie came in. She said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't know." Well, after they left, they wanted me to break down and cry every time I got on a microphone, or they wanted me to get sympathy. You know, they wanted me to feel that you know that emotion like that every time I got on the mic, and I couldn't do it because that wasn't scripted. That was real. You know what I mean? And so uh, they were trying to push me fast to do that. You know, they were trying to, you know, get me to every time Chilly Willy get on the mic, he needs to talk about his story about how he got a Purple Heart and Bronze Star and what happened in combat and da 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 da. And I was like, yo, I can't do this. So then they were like, well, you can't be Chilly Willy. You need to be something else. And so I had to go out, buy some type of fatigue and try to look GI bro. And I told Tommy, I said, Tommy, I'm not no, I think I told Paul. Did it. I said, I don't like this. I don't like this gimmick. And he told Vince. And then I got shit canned. I didn't really get shit canned, actually. I'm not gonna say it like that because John Laurinaitis called me at my hotel room. He said, Chilly, Vince think that your promo's not good and he needs a little bit more work. But so we're gonna move you around. We're gonna move you to Puerto Rico. I said, where? I said, I just got home, bro. I just got home maybe a couple of months ago. I said, if y'all firing me or whatever, or you want to go another direction, I just want to go home. He said, are you sure? Yeah. And I said, yeah, I'm sure. And that was it, man. I packed my bags. I went back to North Carolina. That was it. I was done with WWE, you know.
Well, certainly with hopefully with the advances that we've made in the last 17 plus years in terms of PTSD and all that sort of stuff, it probably would be hopefully handled differently today. But
yeah,
you've been extremely generous with your time. I appreciate it. The last question I want to ask you, I like to ask of all ECW originals, and that is, what are your thoughts on the WWE ECW restart? And do you believe that it was a cynical attempt on the part of Titan to destroy the long-standing love that original fans have for the original ECW?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I said at the beginning of this conversation, ECW fan base was 99.9% all males, 18 to 35, maybe 40, hardcore. I'm talking hardcore. And we really hadn't seen anything like that. Not even in NWA, WCW. Um, ECW, the fans were wild. It was like a cult following. Like I said, I didn't know anything about ECW, but when I got there, I knew that the fans were truly, truly into what they were doing. And so not even WWE fans are like that. And even to this day, even to AEW, nothing. There's no promotion where the fans were as tight and were as, into their wrestling than the ECW at that era. So I think once Vince bought it or whatever, got control of it, he knew, or before he knew that these fans could surpass if Paul kept going, it make it have gotten big. Not probably as big as WWE, but it was getting up there. It was definitely surpassing. And WCW had their problems. ECW was definitely going to be like second in command if things hadn't transpired the way it did. I think Vince had something to do with their television, the television deal that didn't go down. That's one thing about WWE. They got that power. They have that power, and it's just not about being a billionaire. Vince has political power, I think. And if he doesn't want you to be on television nationwide, especially on the East Coast, you're not going to be up there. You know what I mean? Unless you got big money like Tony Khan has. So I think back then, Paul had to succumb to that, and that's why he jumped ship. And when he did that, there was no stopping Vince from taking it and doing what he wanted to do with it. And what he did with it, I think he jacked it up. You know what I mean? I think he really messed it up. It was never the same. It just wasn't good. You know, it's sort of like taking WWE now. Let's say Tony Khan brought WWE, you know, and he tried to do it like that. You know, it just wouldn't be the same. So I think what Vince did was he messed it up, and the fans knew it. The fans knew it was a replica, and they knew it wasn't the real deal. You know when something's fake. We wrestle, we're wrestling, so we know when something's not, not good, and that's just that wasn't good. He should have just left it alone. It shouldn't have been no ECW One Night Stand or Takeover. It should have just been, if you're going to get some of those guys to come in, let them come in and just work them with your guys. Not an ECW thing, not an ECW championship, none of that bull crap. It shouldn't have been, but I mean, it happened the way it happened. So the fans know. The fans know, and the fans knew, that wasn't the real ECW. So that's what it was.
Absolutely. Chilly, where can the fans find you on social media? And do you have any upcoming appearances, projects that you'd like to advise the fans of?
No, I'm here in the Philippines. So I really don't do too much. I help the Philippine wrestling scene out here sometimes, every once in a while, consult with them. But far as upcoming events, I don't do anything. I'm not really on social media, just Facebook, Chilly Willy Jones, and on Facebook. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter, none of that stuff like that. So that's pretty much where you can find me. And just watching your show. Thank you for having me on. And it's been an honor and pleasure to be here. So, if fans are watching, and this is where they can see me in places like this. So I really appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate you and your time tonight for coming on and doing a rare interview with us. We will keep in touch, and
yes.
Hopefully in the future you can come back again and do a fan Q&A or something along those
Definitely.
lines, because a lot of us still remember Chilly Willy and appreciate your contribution to the business.
That's awesome.
So thank you again, sir.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
That is it for this edition of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. I'm Jack Kilby once again. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching the HANNIBAL TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, and click the subscribe button